Welcome to Storycomic Presents, where we interview amazing storytellers and artists. This is episode 533. I'm your host, Barney Smith of Storycomic.com, and I'm joined by Amy Pollack, author of The Adventures of Jellybean series. Amy has been living with the character of Jellybean since she was in fourth grade in 1960. Over the years, she told Jellybean stories to her students during a 40-plus year teaching career, then to her children, and later to her grandchildren. Now, Jellybean's adventures are available for middle grade readers everywhere. The series follows a fourth grade girl facing the kind of challenges many kids recognize: friendship, drama, popularity, feeling overlooked at home, family conflict, changing relationships, grief, and learning how to make choices on her own. In the first book, Jellybean's day begins with a kind of disaster only a kid could truly appreciate: falling into the toilet, missing carpool, and getting to school late, and losing her chance at one of the good parts in the Thanksgiving play. Across the adventures of Jellybean, the further adventures of Jellybean, and still further adventures of Jellybean, Jellybean learns that life is complicated, relationships change, and growing up often means discovering who you really are. We talk about Judy Blume-style honesty, teaching, parenting, grandparenting, and why kids still need coming-of-age books. Amy, thank you for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you, Barney, for having me.
You're welcome. So you first created Jellybean when you were in fourth grade.
I did.
What do you remember about those first stories that you made?
So I just remember getting up in front of the class, which my fourth grade teacher would call me up to do. She was really wonderful when she had downtime. And that's not so much, that kind of thing is not so much done anymore. But I would make up these stories that all my classmates loved about this little girl, mischievous little girl named Jellybean. She was a fourth grader. And they wanted me to, and people I ran into who were classmates of mine in fourth grade, some saved some of my work, including a little play I barely remembered, where all the kids, I assigned them different parts in one of the stories, and my Jellybean changed over the years. This wasn't the final version of her, but it was the beginning.
Why do you think the character stayed with you for so many decades?
Well, it's interesting because every time during my teaching career, especially when I had fourth and fifth and some sixth graders, and then I went on to higher grades, but these aren't really for them. Every time I would talk about them to my students or read parts of them, and in some other classes too, the kids really responded to them and liked them a lot, and they seemed to catch on to the kids' interest. And I changed them a lot. You know, times changed. The more that changes, the more stays the same, but at the same point, certain things did change, which I incorporated. Like, it used to be the phone rang in the house. Well, that doesn't happen. Everyone has their own phones now. That's just one of the things. The names changed. Like, my book was full of Kathys and Debbies and Susies, which were popular when I was younger. And now they're all wide variety of other kinds of names.
Right. Now, how did the character, like the inner monologue of, say, of Jellybean, evolved over the years? Because when you first created her, you were in fourth grade. So how has your experiences and of life kind of adjusted the inner monologue and the thoughts of Jellybean?
Well, that's an interesting question, Barney, because from having my own 3 children to now I have 7 grandchildren, and just having observed many, many, many different kinds of students over the years, the child's the father of the man, as Wordsworth said in the poem. And it's really true. Like, I just learned so much from them if I'd ask a question. And sometimes my daughter would, or one of my granddaughters, like the oldest one specifically, would be, no, that's really stupid. Or don't do that. Because kids, they're so honest, whether you like it or not. And they gave me a lot of springboards to jump off
Mm,
from that just needed to be in there. My books are very real. They deal with a lot of different family situations, as you were saying, friendships, which are so often fraught. Like her parents don't like her really closest friend. How
mm.
often does that happen? A parent doesn't like a girlfriend or boyfriend or friend. And you know what? I had wonderful parents, but they didn't care for some of my choices. So that I learned firsthand. And
Right.
it's just how it is.
And you mentioned some inspiration that you, some re-inspiration of with your children and also your grandchildren. What about, because you were a teacher as well, what about some of the students? Did any of them kind of shape the way you
Oh,
adjusted at Jelly Bean?
honestly, I could go on and on and on. That I could do for hours about their various situations, some not the world's happiest. And when I began to teach, when I was an English professor at college, Montclair State, which is near here, and we went around the class, and they had to each be writing about a conflict in their lives. And they had to say what the conflict they were writing about was going to be.
Hmm.
I was in tears at the end. Some were kicked out of their homes for, I mean, look, there's always two sides to the story and the truth, usually three sides there, but at the same point, some were neglected or abandoned by parents or dropped off at the grandparents' doorstep, and the grandparents didn't quite know what to do with them. And being a grandmother, I understand that too.
Hmm.
So I've just learned about so many various situations and how the kids respond to them. One lived in a homeless shelter, and he was doing better than the one who was raising himself because the parents had signed off on him. It's called an emancipated minor, which I'd never heard of. So I learned a whole variety of things and how they were dealing with them, which was difficult.
So, what made you decide to finally publish your Jelly Bean stories?
So what happened was, okay, I had had some people who had really complimented and enjoyed my stories through the years.
Hmm.
One specifically that was very meaningful was a man, I don't know, became him. He started mentoring me, but when I worked in advertising for a while, when teaching jobs were hard to come by, this was in the 70s, and he had said to me, "Your writing is so good, your dialogue sparkles." And I was, I guess, mid 20s, somewhere in there. He said, "But you haven't had enough experiences yet." And I thought about it, stayed in my mind, and it's kind of true. By that age, you haven't seen enough of life and enough experiences and what others are going through. So I knew, at least, he was Neil Simon's agent also, and he had a lot of celebrities. So I think what he was saying was what he truly believed about me. So there was that. And then a little farther along, because I do presentations at a lot of the schools. And why did it take me so long? Why did it take me 62 years? Well, first I explained to the kids, they all want to know, of course, that I was in school, and then I was working, and then I got married and had three children, was busy raising them. Then my parents were ill and failing and dying, and so I was busy with that and working, of course. And especially when you're teaching English, you come home with mountains of work to correct. So, but I said to them, how many people here, I usually ask, know what procrastinating is? Oh, my mother says I do that. Oh, I know what that is. So that gets a pretty warm reception. And that would be one of my pretty lame excuses. So, my mother in law, who was good hearted but a very critical person of most everything, was just her way. You want to get away with that with daughter in laws now, but in any event, I wouldn't even want to try that route. But one thing she did compliment me on was she said, "Whatever happened to your children's books? They're so good." And it was so meaningful because it came from someone who would just as happily criticize me, oh, saying, "Oh, I think they were trash," but she didn't. And then along came COVID, which was terrible on
Mm.
every just about every level, except you were stuck home. So I could either have cleaned out my closets, which nobody really looks forward to that, or sat down and finished my stories and send them out to publishers, which is that's the route I went. And someone took them. So
Hmm.
that was the start.
So, so Amy, reviewers have compared your books to Judy Blume
Hmm.
and S.E. Hinton. How does that feel?
Amazing, because I didn't set out. I had never read Judy Blume's books. Now I have.
Mm.
But she is her writing is so real and her stories are so truthful,
Mm.
and they deal with a lot of what kids do have to challenges that children do have to deal with. And when I did read them, I was like, wow, I do see some similarities. I went out to meet her. Essie Hinton is why I love that writer. And when I spoke to her in person, we went out to Key West. That's where she has a not-for-profit bookstore, and I got to speak to her for a while, which was very cool, very surreal. And I said, I do have some topics in there. Now, mind you, my books are written for kids on middle grade level, in third, fourth, fifth, sixth grade, let's say, for the most part. Although I give presentations to all ages and of people, and I gear it differently depending who's my audience. But I talked to her about some topics that can be banned now, such as her Jelly Bean's parents not approving of this friend of hers who happens to be of mixed race. And Jelly Bean, at the crux of my book one, spoiler alert, says to her mom specifically, "You just don't like her because she's poor." That
Mm.
would happen in many households, which I know from things that my students have said to me and my kids' friends and that kind of thing. So that's one issue in there. But I treat it again from a kid's point of view, trying to make sense of why this was said to her and why this friend of hers wants to move away because she doesn't feel totally comfortable in the school that Jellybean goes to. So there's that. Then there's a girl, and this happens sadly from time to time. There's a girl, and sometimes among gymnastics kids, and this one friend of hers is anorexic. So
Mm.
there's that's going on, and Jellybean is involved with her. And let's see, trying to think other topics. She's the youngest of four children, and her oldest brother, and this happens in families, is rebellious, and he and the parents are taken up a lot with him, with his issues, and they're sometimes she can't grab her mother's attention because she's too upset about that. Well, this brother, the oldest, goes and drops out of high school. He feels like he's wasting his time and just getting into trouble, and joins the Marines.
Mm.
And that opens a whole nother can of worms for this family, who the parents are, needless to say, concerned. Wanted him, would have preferred a different route for him. That happens. And there's death of a grandparent. Happened to me.
Well, hey there. If you're enjoying our podcast, don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. Your support means the world to us and helps us keep this show going. We love hearing from you, so any feedback is welcome. And thank you for being a part of our podcast family and for all your support. It truly means a lot to us. How do you write serious issues without making the book feel too heavy then?
Yeah, I think about that. And I mix it up with, that's a good point, because it can't be all that way. Any story, because I'm a big reader and I watch, some movies that I enjoy and see that kind of thing. And it can't be unrelieved sadness or tension. So try to intermix it. Like, for example, when Jelly Bean, she's still mischievous, and she sets up this, well, two things. One's a science experiment, which happened to be the day in real life, the year that I was teaching science to the young kids, which was a lot of fun. Um, and they hired me for that because the teacher was on a maternity leave. She was going to be out for the whole year.
Mm.
And she's doing the red food coloring in water with the celery stalks and the flower stem stalks and stems, and the red water in her science class goes all over the floor. And that's a big hot mess, needless to say. And so poor Jelly Bean, she's like, oh no. So there's that, and there's some other funny moments. She tries to set up a restaurant where, um, maybe this is in my book four. It's my three or four, and and we did this as kids, my sister and I. And she puts out all her parents' really good tablecloths, and she notices that restaurants have ketchup and mustard on the table. Well, you can kind of see what happens. It goes all over everything, and this poor mom is like at her wits' end. But we did a lot of crazy things like that. So
So, what should parents do when they? Could you mention it earlier? So, what should parents do when they strongly disagree with a child's friendship?
that's a tough one. Believe me, I encountered it in my life. And the best thing is, because I know I have my 15, not that I'm a big expert, but just based on what I've learned, um, when you have those struggles, that's one in particular. The best thing, what you need to really try and do is keep the lines of communication open. So you're not saying all kinds of things like, if you're at your wits' end. And believe me, again, I had wonderful parents, but what would they say if they didn't approve of some of my behaviors? You're so irresponsible. You're so this or that. I read a book that helped me a lot with having issues with your children. It's called Positive Discipline for Teenagers.
Mm.
And I have no reason to give them a plug except that these books really helped me. And it says, among many other good, helpful hints, and I tried to follow these and they helped me. If you change around the letters of silent, oh no, I'm sorry, of listen, you get silent. And you need to try to be silent when you're, let's say, in a room with one of your children that you're having big disagreements with about a friend, or you think someone's a bad influence, or you don't particularly like them and they love this kid, and you want to explain your reasons, but you have to start out being silent and listening to them, which is really, really hard. It sounds easy
Mm.
when you're talking about it, but not when you're doing it for real. And these two writers, they're two women named Lot and Nelson, helped me so much with this. So that was one
Mm.
major way to try and keep the lines of communication open. And then it tells you what else you can say, which I tried all these kinds of things. Like, okay, now you have to really tune in to what's concerning them, and then say, okay, I've listened to you. Can you listen to what my concerns are? And then you have to try to find some sort of a compromise. Like my one son said, well, you treat me like a baby,
Mm.
which was interesting because he had had a big, crazy party.
Right.
And I was trying to dream up some punishments, which was not easy because he was a teenager and all that. And you just have to work at this, which is a challenge.
So, I have an Amy question and also an author question that's
Hmm.
kind of connected to Jelly Bean. Then
Uh-huh.
is so, what do grandparents understand about children that parents sometimes miss?
So, what's so interesting about that? And again, there are always three sides and the truth and different ways. And if you're the parent, naturally, you're going to show your concerns about what you don't feel like is going well. And that's natural and it's necessary. But at the same point, a grandparent, when you're lucky enough to have one, and I see this, I mean, could I be the grandparent in the book? Well, maybe. somewhat at least. And my grandmother was like that, a real calming influence. So
Mm.
when Jelly Bean, another spoiler alert, does sneak to see her friend because she's not allowed, and the mom's, she's worried and not happy and yelling. And the grandma says she just wanted to go see her friend.
Mm.
And that's it, because they, a grandparent, now I see these kinds of things, will know from experience that some things are a danger. And I'm not
Right.
talking about taking drugs or alcohol and that kind of thing, but other things in life are just are something you have to try and deal with the best you can, as honestly as possible, which is really hard.
Right. So, what conversations do you hope families have after reading the Jelly Bean books together?
Right, at different times. And this is what parents have said to me, and which is pretty important, is like, supposing you had, if there is a friend that you don't really approve of, or you don't like this poor little girl's household, which no one's allowed to go there. So you feel bad for the child, Jellybean's friend, who's a loyal, wonderful, sweet friend. But at the same point, the mother can't be there. There's not much supervision. And that's how it has to be, because the mom, single parent, has to go out and make money.
Mm.
So you have to have that conversation about, well, let's find a way that you can still be friends with. Could she come here? Well, no, she always comes here. Well, can you guys meet somewhere? Can we figure out a way? Can I come with you when you go? Well, of course, no kid's going to like that, but you have to brainstorm to try to figure out some sort of compromise, which is not my book. A long time ago, when my PR person, I said, I don't know what to say when he says, what's the theme of your book? I don't know. He said it's really how to learn to make decisions on your own, which is
Mm.
really a hard thing. And sometimes you
Right.
learn by trial and error. My kids did.
So, Amy, if people want to learn more about you and Jelly Bean, where's the best place they could go to?
So my website, it's amypollock.com.
Okay.
And I do presentations everywhere and at all the schools. And it talks about me and about my books and my background, and you can really find out a lot of things about my books and how you can order them and so
Right.
forth, and how to
Oh,
contact me.
yeah. And so you have a third book coming out, correct?
A fourth.
A fourth one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, here's my third.
All
It's,
right.
and there's the brother who's in the military.
Still
The
further.
still
Okay.
for, but my fourth book, which I'm looking for a more creative title for, because I have, okay, The Adventures of Jellybean, and then The Further Adventures of Jellybean,
Yeah.
and then The Still Further Adventures of Jellybean. But my grandchildren are like, Grandma, really? Like, you got, so I'm thinking of Jellybean Saves the Day, because she helps a kid that gets bullied a lot.
Yeah.
And, she tries to do what's right, and she, has all these issues with popularity and all. Jellybean Saves the Day, or Jellybean to the Rescue, maybe.
Hmm.
Because
Yeah.
bullying, that's a big, big topic now, with
Yeah.
reason.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Perfect. Well, listen, then Amy, you're gonna have to come back on to talk about your fourth book then
okay,
too.
I'm in the
Yeah.
middle of it, so
All right.
I'd love
Well,
to.
thank you. Thank you so much, Amy. I appreciate your time.
Barney, thank you so much.